Hi, I'm Sally-Shakti, Star Priestess and Visionary Writing Guide, and welcome to Writing and Thriving for Visionary Writers. Today, I am excited and honoured to welcome Caroline Carey, who is the founder of Middle Earth Medicine Ways and has published many books. So I'm going to hand over to Caroline now to tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice and your writing. Caroline, welcome.
Thank you, Sally-Shakti. It's lovely to be here. And yeah, definitely one of my favourite topics, writing. So what do you want to know? What do your listeners want to know?
Well, we would love to know how writing fits into your practice as part of your ritual, part of your medicine. So maybe you could talk generally first a little bit about what you do in the world and how writing is a part of that.
Okay, yeah, very good. Great question. Well, first of all, I would say I rarely use the word practice. Practice is not something that I'm familiar with. I've never had a practice. I always feel like a practice for me personally is something that I'm going to give up on and try something else, either because I get bored or it doesn't work for me. But I suppose I see my practice as life and living. You know, to practice being principled in my life, to practice being kind, to being loving, to being present. You know, all these things are what I would consider my practice. So every conversation I have with another person, all my creativity, the work that I bring into the world, that's all part of it. Yeah, there is nothing I do that is separate from my daily living. And I share that a lot within my work. So I'm not an advocate for any kind of practice. But having said that, in the past I have danced pretty much every day. I've often written at times when I've been dancing. So I would consider that as a daily routine in many ways. I don't dance every day now. I think age has crept in a little bit, and I find myself doing a lot of other things like walking my dogs, and that can take up a lot of my sort of exercise time. With writing informs everything that I do, from the pieces of work that I do to meditations to when I dance. There's usually always something that I want to write about, my shamanic journeys, the drum journeys that I work with. That would always give me a space for writing. I want to do things like a daily review. I want to look at myself and how I've interacted with the world on that day. What joy have I brought into my life, and what joy have I seen? The things that mean something to me. And I also want to maybe keep myself in check a little bit. Like, have I behaved in a principled way today? So that's always very helpful for me. I am writing another book at the moment, so I need to be giving that some attention. So I carry my phone around with me a lot, and I have it on my walks, and I have it on buses and on journeys and the like, because it has a great little notepad in it, a notebook in it, that I can just, you know, even if I'm walking and I'm not able to write at that time, I can be recording onto it and then transferring that onto my laptop to become part of my book. So there's always some writing going on, whether it's in my head, whether it's on my phone, whether it's in a notebook, or in my she shed here. So it's quite a busy life I have. And then of course I send out a newsletter, sometimes 2 or 3 times a month, but definitely once a month, and 2 different ones. I write a blog, so I'm kept very busy with all of that. There is always something to be writing about, and I love doing it. I find with writing, it's one of the ways that I learn. So I'm a kinesthetic learner, highly kinesthetic learner. I don't learn from reading something or a lecture or somebody writing something on a blackboard when I was in school, that sort of thing. I have to be physical. I have to do things to learn. And so writing is a very big part of that. I learn from my writing.
Well, thanks, Caroline. There's so many places I want to go with that. I'm just going to start with what's most fresh at the moment, is that what you've just said about writing being a physical practice. I resonate with that so much. And I know that at the beginning, you were speaking about your daily routines. Everything comes from this same place of kindness, compassion, the principled way that you live your life. And then that expands into forms, whether that is dance or whether that is writing or whether that's shamanic journeying, and they all seem to connect and inform each other. When I was in academia, it was very hard for me to land writing in the body, and that was something I very much wanted to do, bring it out of the head and into the body. And I would guess that perhaps quite a few people who are on a similar path to us have an understanding of this, but perhaps some people don't. When we come through education and the way we're taught about writing and reading is it's very heady. So how did you develop a process of bringing writing into embodiment that felt empowering for you?
Well, firstly, I'm not an academic. I've never been in that sort of educational system. I think that the writing that I do doesn't necessarily start in my head. So I'd be quite different in that way. I think it starts in my body. It starts as maybe a dance, a walk, a connection to nature. It starts with a heart feeling, a sensation. And once it's started to come out onto the page, then I get more clear about what it is. Now, of course, I will have thoughts about things that I want to write about, but it's not until I start writing them down that I really get clear on what they are. So I can formulate ideas and the like, but they don't mean much to me until they're on the page. And then, of course, there's editing to do and different ways to work with it in that sense. And I might need to get creative with it. I might need to draw something or create patterns, and then I can adapt that into a piece of writing. So probably quite different in that way for me. If I had, say, a feeling or an emotion, and I generally use the word emotion because that's energy in motion, rather than a feeling that I'm going to talk about, oh, I think I've got this feeling and it's all about this, doesn't mean a lot to me. It's what happens in the moment. So with the heart, I'm experiencing a sensation, maybe a disturbance of some kind. And I don't like the word trigger, but some people use that word trigger. I like the word, there's a disturbance, there's some energy field that isn't feeling very well at the moment, or I'm not sitting well with it. And so I might move, I might dance with that, or do something creative with it. And then gradually that will start to clear, and I'll make meaning of it on the page. And that's where it'll help me to clarify what's really going on. And I'll get some good information and wisdom from it. Yeah. So slightly different there as to whether we're writing from the head or writing from the heart or writing from the body and experiences. And I always say to my writers, you just start to be with the body, with the heart, and then just let whatever it is come down the arm, into your hand, into your fingers, into the pen, onto the page, and just begin to write. Now, the first sentence or so might be gobbledygooch, it might not make much sense, but if you keep going with it and just allowing and allowing and allowing, something comes through much clearer, and yeah, it can be quite magical, it can be quite poetic and prose-like, and full of wisdom. It's trusting in something other than the thinking mind I often talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I could really feel that resonating when you were speaking about that process of starting with your heart and starting with an emotion or a disturbance. It's a much more embodied way of approaching writing that then leads you into a relationship with writing that's more one of inquiry, where you can inquire through the writing, what do I think, what am I feeling, what's the wisdom that's being presented to me here. And that, I think, I would say, really puts you at a strong advantage, because I spent a lot of my own past, and I spend a lot of time now as a coach trying to help people to unlearn what education has taught us about writing when it all comes from the head, and then it gets stuck there because we don't want to express it. It might be wrong. We might say something that we shouldn't say. And what you've given us there is this very much more beautiful, grounded, embodied way to inquire into the inner wisdom that is already there for us and always available to us when we connect with it.
Absolutely. And to be honest, that's how I've written all my books, all my poetry. I've actually tried other ways more recently with my work, is to be a bit more analytical and to plan it a little bit more, and to look at how I could structure something from the beginning rather than having to structure it at the end, which takes a heck of a lot of time. And that's been an interesting process for me. It really has. And I've learned a lot through it, because I think there's always a time to learn a different way to do things. There's always something we can learn from other people's experiences of doing stuff. And we can just see if, well, does that fit me? Does that work for me? What do I actually get from that? How different would that be? And just have a look and see. It may work, it may not. There may be some useful bits to it and that I can adopt, maybe not. So I'm trying things out at the moment.
It's always good to be in that process of inquiry and learning and exploring, isn't it? There's always, like you said, there's always more you learn, or at least if you then know it doesn't fit, then you can leave it and move on to something else.
Absolutely. I think my last book, Misguided Angel Revisited, which was a rewrite of my first book, which I'm actually very proud of, because I think I did a great job of it and had a brilliant mentor and editor, and we worked together on it in a very different way to what I'm used to. And I'm very proud of that piece of work now. When I first put it out, it was just a bit embarrassed by it, really, and I would really hope that there's no copies out there for sale anymore, even though I know I can't, I've no power over that. Yeah, I'm quite proud of it. And yeah, I did things quite differently in many ways with that. Having a mentor for one thing, and really working on each piece very carefully, that was really good. So yeah, there was a lot to learn from that. And my next book, I'm adopting more of some of those strategies and seeing how it goes. But it's taking me longer. That's the interesting thing. It is taking me longer.
Okay, so I'd love to come back to your next book in a bit, but let's stick with Misguided Angel Revisited for a moment. This beautiful, very large book that Caroline has produced. It's really substantial and it really tells your life story. I think we can go, into a lot of places by looking at this book. You mentioned just now about the difference, this being your first book and your most recent book, and the original version of it. Perhaps there's some embarrassment now about putting that out. So many writers will recognize that feeling, and again, that's just another way that we learn, especially when we are kinesthetic learners. We have to learn by doing. So basically, I think if you don't get your first book out, you won't get your second or fifth or sixth book out. So we have to do it. And then you got to this point where you wanted to revisit it and you worked with a mentor to do that. So anywhere you want to go with this, could you tell us about your writing process, how you wrote this book, the first time or the second time or both?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the first time I wrote it, I had no expectation of writing a book. I remember as a little girl, I wanted to write a poetry book. I was always quite obsessed with poetry. I remember asking for one of my Christmas presents from Father Christmas, I want the biggest poetry book ever. And I got the Golden Treasury of poetry for my Christmas present. It's not that big now, but it was pretty big when I was that high. And I really loved that book, but I wanted to change a lot of it. I wanted to change some of the words, and I remember scribbling in it, and my mother saying, "You shouldn't be doing that to books." But no, there were things about it that I thought that could be a bit better, and I think they could use a different word there. things like that. So yeah, I've still got those scribbles in some of those scribbles in that book. I've still got the book today. And yeah, I got so fascinated with it, and I wanted to write a poetry book. And what I've realized as I've got older and I did write a book, my language is quite poetic. My writing is quite poetic. So I feel like I have written a poetry book. I have put my poems in a book as well, but that was quite a poetic book in that level. And when I say that I'm a bit embarrassed by that book and hoping it's not out there, that's not totally true, because I'm really proud of the fact that I sat down on my bed one day. It was pouring with rain outside. I had one of those little white laptops, one of the original Macs sort of thing, and I sat down with it and I just began to write. And I remember putting in the very beginning, yeah, and I went from there, and I started to write my story and started to write about the experiences that I had had. And as I went along with it, I began to think possibly I could be writing a book here. I'm putting poetry in it. Maybe this is what I'm doing. Now, I wrote quite a lot over a period of time. And then I wanted to see what other people thought about it and whether it was possible for it to become a book. And I knew I'd have to get somebody to look at it in an editorial way. And I happened to know this wonderful lady who lived in the village that I'd had a bit of a squabble with. We hadn't quite seen eye to eye. I knew she was an editor, and I also knew that she was an astrologer. And I chatted to her one day and I said, look, I know we haven't seen eye to eye, but that means you're the perfect person to have a look at my book for me. You know something of the book industry and editing and astrology, but I didn't mention the astrology. She mentioned that. And I said, would you consider having a look for me? I thought she'll be really honest with me. She won't try to please me. She's already told me off about something else. That I can trust this woman. And so she read it and she came back to me. She said, look, I've been doing your astrological chart alongside it, which I've given her permission to do. And she said, you've written 2 parts of this book. This book is in 2 parts. It's very interesting. I do think you've got a book there. Yes, it does need some editing and spelling mistakes, grammar, all those sorts of things that I've never been very good at, getting better. But she said, looking at your astrological chart and reading this book, there is a 3rd part to this book, and you're going to live that 3rd part, and you're going to live it soon. She said, you need to put this away for 2 years and just let go of it for now. And my goodness, she was absolutely right. Within that 2 years, the rug was pulled out from under my feet. I went through a massive marital home breakdown, all kinds of things going on, which were quite traumatic. My life was changing. I left the country I was living in, came back home to live in England. I'd been in Ireland for 17 years. And yeah, life was topsy-turvy and all over the place. And I went through all of that and I got grounded from it. I sort of got myself back together from this whirlwind, which also includes a wonderful love story as well, where I met my husband now. And yeah, it just gave me the material for the 3rd part of the book. There it was. This is what I need to write. And yeah, it was quite phenomenal at the time. So I sat down and in a short amount of time wrote the 3rd part. Had a bit of editing done on it, not enough, I have to say. And there was a publishing company that they've gone out of business now, but it was called My Voice Publishing. And their whole ethos was to publish books as you had written them, not to be, obviously they wanted you to get an editor in and check your spellings and that sort of thing. But on the whole, they were not going to tell you what cover to use, tell you how it should be set out, change some of your chapters around, all that sort of. So no, this is your book, this is your voice, we publish it as it is. Now, they weren't a big company, they didn't do a lot of the promotional stuff with it, but they were willing to publish it, and I was pleased with that. And that's where it went, into My Voice Publishing, and it was my voice completely. So that was great. That gave me a really great sense of self-worth and that my writing was worth something. The feedback I got from it was incredible. People writing to me saying, thank you for sharing your story in such a kind of natural and human way. It was just a very honest description of my life, how I had lived it, the experiences I'd had, the dramas I'd had, the sexual abuse was named in it, and some of my other challenges. And it was a short while after writing that things I did feel a bit worried about some of the things I'd written. I didn't name anybody as such, except where they said they gave permission for that. I've changed names in it, that sort of thing. And it wasn't about that I didn't like it. I think a lot of it was, it felt quite immature. I've grown as a writer. I mean, this is a long time ago now. I've grown as a writer. I knew I could do better. I knew that I could bring it up to date. And there were things that I felt I'd really missed out on writing in it. I didn't mention this and I didn't mention that. And so I wrote another book called Reclaimed Innocence, which was like its sister, its little sister coming alongside. And I published that book. And as time went on, and more recently then in these last few years, I thought those two books need to go together. They need to be joined, because there's the sort of immature me, and then slightly more mature, and then I could add to even more to that and bring them together in this kind of mandala, this vesicus piscis of creation, these two pieces of work, which I did. And so Misguided Angel became that reclaiming of innocence, and it was revisited completely. And I was then able to bring it right up to date a couple of years ago, as to where I'm at now with it, and understanding what my particular medicine is from the experiences that I've had. So it was a joy to actually come back to that and say, right, and I got my mentor and I said, look, help me do this. Let's work through this and see what is really needed here in every chapter. There were some things I did take out, and there were other things that I needed to put in and change from a different perspective. I had a different perspective about some of my experiences. I had a healthier, more mature one about them. And I wanted to write that. And I wanted anybody who had read Misguided Angel, the first one, could see how things can change and how we start to see a different way, to grow from our experience of writing as well.
Oh, absolutely, Caroline. Thank you for sharing that story. The book itself, as I read it, the revisited version, it feels more like a teaching memoir. The wisdom of who you are now comes through, and the like you say, the medicine that you can share, the medicine that you have experienced through living your life in the ways that you have, with the experiences that you have shared in the book. So I wonder if writing the book the first time was very much a form of catharsis for you, for those experiences. And you mentioned a little bit about the response that you got. Can you say a little bit more about how people opened up to your story that you shared?
Well, it was cathartic. There were things I had to revisit that I might have chosen not to had I not been writing, but I knew I had to tell the truth. So I did go through a lot, and that's where dance was really helpful. So I'd be writing, I might get in touch with something that disturbed me, and I would dance with it. And then I would dance and see what came, and then write. So it was all part of that creative world for me at that time. And the response from other people, that was beautiful. And it was, I think, just the fact that I had shared my story, that I'd been so open with it. We hear a lot of these stories these days about sexual abuse, about all kinds of abuse from childhood. We hear about the recovery of much of this as well, and where people have come to. And I do think that people are hungry to hear some of these things and to feel the empowerment for themselves around that also. And so could actually, this is how she worked through her experiences, and now she's got a strong message from that. I want to do that too. I've got a story to share. And we all have such unique stories. We might have similar tragedies or growing up with the suffering that we've experienced, but we all have different ways of writing and different ways that we've found towards recovery from it. So I think it's encouraging. I think people felt encouraged to share their story after reading mine and saying, yes, I could do this too. And I think it touches that part of us that has been silenced, and particularly around sexual abuse. You know, you're being told to keep quiet, to keep a secret, to not speak out about what's happened to you. And so for me, one of the biggest healing aspects of it was to break the silence, to let go of the secret, but not as a victim. I didn't want to come across as a victim in any shape or form. You know, I had worked through this. I was okay. You know, I was dealing with it. I was now having a healthy relationship. I could now see why the other relationships I'd had were not healthy, but I could most importantly see my part in that and why I chose the relationships that I chose. Why did I do that? Because of my lack of self-worth, or because I you know, if I had somebody that I had to fix or make better or rescue, I didn't have to look so closely at myself. There were lots of reasons for these relationships, but I got very, very clear within that writing the changes I had made in myself. So that is an incredible thing when you see how different you are from when you first experienced those challenges. That's an amazing experience.
Yeah, and let's dig down into the medicine, and I know it's not going to be possible to give like a clear answer to this and to separate things out, but you mentioned that you would dance in response to some of the discomfort that was arising in your emotions or in your story as you were writing. You have, I know that you have a shamanic practice that you teach people as well.
Not practice, not practice.
Not practice. I love what you do with words.
Way of life.
Shamanic way of life. Oh, I like that. You have a shamanic way of life that you also teach people. So there are lots of parts of the medicine kind of feeding into that alchemy that is continually kind of working on you and changing you, and you are participating in that process in all of the different ways that you're participating in it. To what extent do you think that the writing was helping to transform? What extent was the writing part of the medicine that was helping you to heal and to transform?
Well, for me, the writing is really important because I grew up as a little girl loving to write. I have quite a story actually about how I did learn to write, because my brother went to school on his first day, came home and wrote his name for my mother. And she, rather than going, oh, what a clever boy, aren't you good? Well done. Isn't school wonderful? She thought, oh, I'm a terrible mother. I could have taught him to do that long before he went to school. He got it straight away. So me, 3 years old, you're going to learn to write and read before you go to school. So she had me sitting down at a table, insistent that I learned from a very early age, which my brother obviously would have been could have maybe been quite good at that, but I was terrible. I hated it. I did not want to do that. But she insisted. And although I did love to write eventually, that was hard for me to get started. But what I did do was I wrote in my, probably because I was a kinesthetic learner, probably because, or for many reasons, that I was very, very different to my family, that I'd sit there and I would make up words, and I would make up poems and prose and ways of writing that she probably didn't approve of. I can't really remember exactly. I know she used to get quite annoyed with me, but I would just do it my way. And she used to sing that song to me, you know, I did it my way, and she did it her way, and and that was part of my upbringing, the fact that I was just constantly doing things my way. But I learned to be very poetic with my writing because of that, and that's when I started to love it. And so I've forgotten what the question was that you first asked me, because that felt relevant somehow within that. But I continued in that vein, and that's me loving. I'm picking up now. That's me loving my way of writing. Now, other people who work with me, they might not be writers. That's okay. What they do need to be is creative, or have a yearning to create, or a yearning to write, or a yearning to dance. And nobody's maybe given them the permission to do that, or to do it in their way. So all my courses, online courses, in-person courses, they'll all involve movement, embodiment, creativity, some writing. But I'm there to give people permission to find what's right for them. So yes, I have writing groups that I have one at the moment where it's specifically for people who want to publish their work. So that's very specific along those lines. And another one that is incorporating dance, creativity, making things, and writing. Yeah, so people come to me for different things. They might come to me just because they want to dance and they don't want to do any writing. They're not interested in that. So it's not it's not that people have to want to write to come to me, but they will have the opportunity to when they do work with me. Does that answer your question?
I think it weaves in and out. It goes in and out of that question. And you started with that really rich story of you learning to write. And I taught in schools, in secondary schools, for over 10 years before I kind of broke out and started to do things my way as well. And I have big problems with the education system, especially the way that we're taught to write and read. And one of the problems I have with that is being taught or forced too early.
Yeah.
I'm very aware of other sort of Northern European countries, Scandinavian countries, where children start school actually a lot later, and they're encouraged to take up what interests them. It seems almost like your brother had that opportunity and then he kind of excelled, and you had what you were asked to do was being forced to begin before you were perhaps ready, but
Absolutely.
it gave you ultimately that very rich response to then be able to subvert what you were being asked to do, and to find your own way to do it, to make it meaningful for you.
Yes. Well, it did, but of course that didn't sit well in a school system.
No.
Like I say, I had a terrible, terrible time in school. I would sit there and look out the window most of the time, as a lot of people talk about, not being able to engage with the structure, the conformity, that linear process, and to be like everybody else and learn the way they're all learning. There wasn't any, I went to school back in I was born in 1960, so when I was little, it wasn't the schools we have today. I think they have been changing. I don't know how much, but yeah, that was such a struggle for me, such a struggle. I was so desperately unhappy there, and hence, when my children were little, they went to the first two, and then how did it work? Four, because I've got 6 children. I have to think here. But they went to a little Steiner school when we were in England for a short while, up to class 1, and then when we moved over to Ireland, we homeschooled them for a good part of their life. In fact, my one boy, he said, "I think I'd like to go to school," and he went off to try it, and he lasted a week. He came home on the Friday and he said, "Well, the girls had to sit inside Friday afternoon and do knitting, and the boys had to go out and play football." I said, "Well, I can play football every day of the week with my brothers. I want to try knitting." And they said no, he wasn't allowed to. Can you imagine that in this day and age? So he decided school wasn't for him, and he'd rather get out on his boats and do all sorts of other things. And all my children are incredibly creative, and they've all followed what is their gift, I like to think, even though they have challenges within that and difficulties. I can see where they've been encouraged to do the things that they love, and they've excelled in that in so many ways. And I always said, when my children were little, I wanted to look for their gifts, for their particular talents, and encourage that. Now, some did go to school earlier, and there is a difference. There is a definite difference in how they brought themselves into the world, but they still hold that quality from their innocence. And I really witnessed that. I witnessed that now in my grandchildren, this particular quality that each individual has. And this is where the soul has come through into that innocent being. The soul is alive and showing exactly what they're here to do and to be and to bring as their gifts into the world. But that's generally ignored in favor of a curriculum. And I abhor that. I just think it's so sad. We go on to then being teenagers and getting a careers advisor who says, well, this job, you've got these, tick to these boxes, now you can have this job and this would be the best thing for you. There's no soul advisor saying, but what do you love? What do you feel passionate about? What would you like to give your energy to? What did you love as a little child? What was really important for you? And how can we develop that throughout your life? Middle Earth Medicine Ways, that's the body of work I've created, totally about that, from innocence to sovereignty, to look back over your life and see what were you gifted with from God's spirit, whatever you want to call it, what came through at your birth or your conception that was, yeah, this is my particular innate gift. Alongside that will come a core wound, a particular wound that you'll have to work with, and that will challenge you and disturb you. And these two together, when they meet, they create a unity, a fire of unity, a spark. And that's your own creative spark that's coming into the world and saying, okay, we've got to make this work. We've got to make this work. We've got to find the solutions for the problem here, but this is what you're going to use in order to do that. And we go round this wheel and we look at, it's the wheel in the background there, the wheel of soul's return, and we look at each stage of the soul's development through life. Yeah. Now, no one's going to do that with us as a little child unless we're really fortunate. But as an adult, we can reclaim some of that. It's never too late. And that's what brings us to that place of sovereignty and wise elderhood, so that we can then share our gifts with those who follow, with the children who follow, and those who are yet to be born. That's my philosophy. That's my my point of view, if you like, about the work that I bring into the world. And within that, we include marketing, we include how to bring it through in a good, healthy way. We look at how to be creative with it, and we look at the struggles, the emotional challenges within it, and the embodiment of the whole experience. So yeah, that's what I'm passionate about. You can hear it, hey?
Yeah, I can feel the power of that as you speak about it. So I'm curious about the wheel that you just mentioned. I think you called it the wheel of the soul's...
Wheel of Soul's Return.
The wheel of soul's return. This might seem a little bit of an abstract question, but I'm going to try and ground it. So you spoke about revisiting your book.
Yeah.
You wrote it then from... What I got when you were talking about your process was there was almost like a sort of Maiden Mother Crone aspect to this book. It's like you were writing out the medicine of your maidenhood, initially perhaps from a perspective of the mother, and then needing to take that extra time that the astrologer editor advised you to take to kind of step more into your cronehood, into the elder wisdom of the deeper alchemical medicine that you could bring to this story of your life. So I wonder how that maybe maps onto the wheel. And what I'm thinking about is that often we approach stories and writing as linear narratives. Is there a way that you kind of have been thinking about restructuring that as something more in the form of a wheel?
I think it informed the wheel, because what I could see in that was the journey I had taken as a soul explorer and my interests around that. And when I look back over it, I see the journey, I see the archetypal qualities and the resources that I had needed and the tools that I had needed to get through this experience of life. And then when it's almost coming to the completion of the book in a way, I started to dream in Middle Earth Medicine and the wheel. I started to see the wheel. The wheel is created from my journey. It's not something I've gone away and studied with somebody else. I haven't had a teacher about it. Life is my university. That is what has taught me what the Wheel of Soul's Return is. Yeah. So there's been no education around that except for living the experience. And that's what I teach other people. Live your experience, then you'll know what it is you're bringing into the world. It's as simple as that, really. That wheel is the story of my life, but I've managed to turn it into something that's useful for others. That to me is true medicine. If we want to serve in the world, if we want to give something useful, then transform something from our own experience, turn that into a body of work or however you see it, and offer that back to the world.
That's so powerful. That's really it in its essence, isn't it? I really appreciate you sharing that, Caroline. And it's great to have that image of the wheel behind you there as we're speaking to kind of inform us and give its energy. I'm curious then about this wheel began as something very personal to you. It's your life story, it's your experiences. How did that become something that you could share with others, that they could resonate with and take their own journey through and their own medicine from?
Well, I was actually teaching in South Africa. I was holding an ongoing group there over a period of about a year and a half. And I had just sent everybody out into nature to do a bit of a vision quest. And I was sitting back by the fire with my drum. And the question I always had with me, all through my life, in fact, was who am I and what's mine to do? What's mine to be in the world? What is my work? And every model of work I'd ever been with, any training I'd ever done, and I'd done loads, I would be asking that question, but yeah, what's mine? This is somebody else's body of work, but what's mine? And I was sitting there by the fire and I was drumming, and I suddenly got this download, this image that came through. It was all made up out of bones. Well, the program that I was holding at the time was called the Hollow Bone Gatherings for the work. And I saw it in this amazing shape, like it was very like a Kabbalah. I could see these circles and these connections between everything. And then when I started, I drew it and I was writing it down and drawing images of it and thinking, what's this about? And over a period of a few weeks, I started to see that what it was holding was different aspects of my life. And it was, and I started to, because I didn't know much about the Kabbalah at all at the time, but I started to read about it and recognize, oh, this is about the soul's journey. This is about bringing our gifts to earth, from what I understood of it. I'm sure there's so much more to it, but it was just that shape that I was given. And I started to recognize how the work that I had been offering fitted into it and the experiences that I had had. And so over a period of time, and I spent a lot of time in the yurt I had in the garden playing with this and drawing it out and making maps of it. And I realized that I could create a circle with it, and that would be much easier to understand rather than this thing with bones and a skull and fire. And the imagery was just quite incredible what I was seeing. Well, I wasn't going to I have got the original of it, and it does look quite bizarre, in fact. So the wheel was much simpler and a much more helpful way to engage with it, as many wheels are, and we're aware of the wheel behind you. It's like it's simpler and it's easy for people to understand. But it did completely fit into a 9-segment wheel that I was able to put all these different images into, and then start to write about the journey. So I've written another book about the Wheel of Soul's Return, to explain all the different archetypes and qualities that they hold. And then I talked to my mother-in-law, she was in her early 80s at the time. I said, you know what, I want to make some oracle cards about this. And she said she was an artist, and her artwork is some of my favorite artwork. She sadly died last year, at 90. But we talked about it, and I said, you know, your artwork is my favorite. It really is my favorite artwork that she'd been doing. I loved it so much. And I said, wouldn't it be great if we could work with you and we could do some art together and make some oracle cards? And she agreed to it. She was a bit like, well, how many cards is that? So it's only about 52. And she was like, you what? But we found a way to create, and these are the cards that she she painted. She's got, you know, we've got beautiful paintings. I'll show you. There's the Sovereign. We've got beautiful paintings of all of these. And yeah, this one's the Gathering. And she just did such a incredible piece of work. You know, look at them. I mean, these little baby and the sacred contract, you know. So these hold the story of the Wheel of Soul's Return. This pack of cards is part of that experience for me. Putting it all into visual imagery was so helpful for me in that. And that's become a big part of what we do. Is there's the wise elder. Isn't that gorgeous? She does these lovely sylph-like figures. Anyway, I asked if she would do that, and she did, and we've created these cards together. And yeah, books, cards, Wheel of Soul's Return. I would never ever have imagined that I would be creating a whole body of work like that. Never entered my head that would happen. But bit by bit, from that moment, sitting by the fire with my drum, you know, doing my own kind of vision quest in that sense, it started to be developed. And I had to make space and just allow for it to come through. But it all started really from me looking at my life journey, my experience, what I'd had to survive from and to recover from, and how I'd had to grow with that. So, yeah.
Those cards are so beautiful, Caroline. Thank you for showing us and sharing them. And just as well, you know, that connection energetically that you have, your mother-in-law's paintings, that they mean so much to you, and that brings so much more meaning into the deck. I love that they're round, they're circular as well. That must have been, was it difficult to find a producer to do that for you?
Not particularly, no. We've got a local printers here that took that on. My husband is Ben Cole. He's a cinematographer and photographer, and so he took the photographs and was able to put them into their round form. And then, of course, people do print round things. They costs a bit more, but they did them, and they're just up the road. Actually, I was really surprised that I would find somebody literally so close. They've also put my books together and done all the work involved there. So that's been really great. We've got a nice relationship with everybody who's taken part in all of this. Yeah.
That's really, really wonderful. We're coming towards the end of our conversation time, and I've got so many more things that I want to talk to you about. It seems like your journey towards publishing, which we didn't really get into, maybe we can have another conversation another time as we kind of move into your journey towards publishing as well, and how that's been for you, bringing these books into form in the world. And I just want to finish by giving you an opportunity to talk about the book that you're writing now, and where that's going for you.
Well, it's not the book I thought I was starting to write to begin with. It's having its own journey. And I'm working with my mentor again. I've actually got a piece of writing going out. It's in an anthology for publishers in America. And so I was working quite a bit on that recently. It's all about feral women. I won't say what it's. I don't know what the name of the book is at the moment, but I can certainly let you know eventually. But that's quite exciting. So I had to take a bit of time out to do that. And this book, yeah, I'm sort of probably about nearly halfway, maybe third to halfway through it. I know there's a lot more to come, and I have a tendency to wait for the information to really drop in. Now I'm starting a new course, a women's course, this coming week, and I know that's going to inform a lot of this book. So I like to work, I like to dance, I like to live experiences and let that inform what I do with my most recent book. That's where it's at the moment. I'm very interested in where it's going, and it's certainly to do with trauma and a more shamanic view of trauma. It's definitely to do with us bringing our gifts into the world. It will hold more energy around helping others to do that. You know, my last book, Misguided Angel, was very much what I've had to do, and hopefully that inspires. But this, I want to give people exercises and things that this is what you can do in order to manifest your dreams and your talents in the world. So it's definitely going that way. And I'm quite excited to see how it does develop. But I don't have a beginning, a middle, and an end as yet. It's that it's going to show me, and my experience of it is going to show me what's needed for it. And I hope to have it ready by the end of the year. I don't know where publishing is concerned. I kind of gave up trying to get publishers to take on my work. I just thought, they always want to change everything, and it doesn't quite sit that well with me. I'll just do it myself, and of course I always do things myself. I would love it if a publisher just went, "Oh, we really love this book. We really want to take you on," and yeah, but don't change the picture. Don't change those sentences. That's me. That's my voice. So it's kind of tricky there. But it would be rather nice to not have to do it all myself. But my books are out there. They're on Amazon. They're on my website. I was a bit iffy about Amazon, and I took them off for a while because I thought, big corporate companies, I'm not so sure. But then somebody wrote to me and said, look, if you hadn't put it there, I wouldn't have been able to read it. And so I've gone, you know what, my voice being out in the world is really important, I believe, and I've got a good, strong message for people. So I bit the bullet there, and yeah, they are available. So I work hard at it.
Congratulations, really from the story you shared with us today, this sense of you as a kinesthetic doer, you embody your way of life. That's what informs your books and your writing, and that's also, I feel, what gives you the energy and the motivation to get your work into the world, to go out and find the printer that's just in the town where you live, that can bring your work into form and share it with others. And as writers on a spiritual path with certain ethics, we have to ask ourselves questions about where are we going to put our work, how are we going to put it out there, who are we going to put it with. But ultimately what you're choosing to do is to share your story with the people who need it through your lived experience, and that's really, really powerful, Caroline. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're most welcome. It's been lovely to share this with you, to have this conversation, because sometimes we don't get the opportunity to really speak about it, and you suddenly go, oh right, yeah, I have done that, yeah, I did do that, and that is great, and that is a good message. So yeah, thank you for giving me that platform and opportunity.
You're welcome. Thank you for sharing your story with us, Caroline, and thank you for sharing your writing in the world and your medicine.
Thank you.